You keep shouting out that name. That name is an enemy.
Oh.
And I told you he's an enemy. And you're going to keep shouting him out, not realizing you go there, you're dead. Because he dead.
And then you're talking about, I don't want to, name specific names. Talking about
Cemetery Larry, he in the cemetery.
Okay.
Cemetery Larry, I like that.
Cemetery. I had his raise. I got his raise right in the pocket. Now I got to give it to somebody else. Now I got to give everything he worked for. I got to give it to somebody else because the person he went with, he got to that shit. Time slot from him.
Okay.
Because they're not going to want to compete. Now they fired. Like, so, you know what I mean? Like, they fired. You know what I mean?
So,
like, how his loyalty was.
Was there anything specifically, you said Rashad specifically, was there anything that he specifically did that let you know,
Yes.
like, I really can't?
He kept shouting out the dude's name
Mm-hmm.
that was tanking our show.
Cemetery Larry.
Yeah, like, the dude didn't do nothing for you, dog. Your deal was done before he got here. First of all, real talk, he tried to fire you at the beginning of the season. He tried to fire you at the beginning of the season. That's why they were trying to, like, Skip was getting paid for 4 days. He was only there 3. One was going to be our show. And that was to replace him because they both contrarian. They both go against it. But they said Skip does it better. He don't cuss. He don't drop the N-bomb every other hour. So they're looking for these sponsors. So they're trying to fire you. Me and Joe standing on 10 toes. Nah, we good. We're good with our roster. We're number 1 with our roster. Right? So what they did is like, all right, well, Joe and Gil ain't breaking. Hey, Rashad, you want to go to the football? Yeah, come on, football on Friday. Yeah, do a little football. So you're going to jump on the football. Then they're like, hey, can Skip come on the show with you? We can do that on Friday too. Then they do an episode with Skip on Friday. And he's like, oh man, me and Skip. And so they did that to him.
Right.
But I'm like, yo, dude never did anything. Why are you going with dude? I told you we had beef and we had war. He's trying to take over Gilbert Arenas. So you giving him shout outs, 3 of them. I told you we beefing with him.
Gilbert Arenas has officially thrown gasoline on the already burning Gil's Arena drama, and now Rashad McCants is making it clear that he is not going to sit back and let Gilbert tell the entire story without responding. After Gilbert appeared on Carmelo Anthony's 7 p.m. in Brooklyn podcast and discussed what allegedly happened behind the scenes with Underdog, he also addressed his issues with Rashad. According to Gilbert, he had already warned people about the problems happening behind the scenes and believed certain members of the crew chose to support the wrong people when everything started falling apart. But Rashad McCants clearly did not appreciate the way Gilbert told that story. Shortly after the interview started making rounds, Rashad responded and basically said, "Bring me on the show. If it sounds like a lie, it's a lie. I've got receipts." And then he took things even further by teasing that a Netflix documentary could be loading while accusing Gilbert of trying to damage his reputation with what he says are lies. Now that is a serious response because Rashad is basically telling everyone that Gilbert's version of events is not the full story and that he may have evidence to prove it. But here's where the situation gets really interesting. If Gilbert's story is accurate, then he claims Rashad knew about the problems happening with Underdog before everything became public. Gilbert allegedly warned him that there were issues behind the scenes and that changes were coming to the show. So if Rashad really knew all of that and still publicly supported certain people connected to the situation, it becomes much easier to understand why Gilbert felt betrayed. On the other hand, Rashad clearly believes there is another side to this story, and he seems more than willing to tell it. So now fans are waiting to see whether he actually comes forward with those receipts he mentioned. Because if Rashad really has proof that contradicts Gilbert's version of events, this entire Gil's Arena situation could become even messier. At this point, we have Gilbert's side, Rashad is promising receipts, and the audience is stuck in the middle trying to figure out who was actually telling the full truth. Now, as far as the rest of the situation goes, we still have to wait and see what Brandon Jennings is going to say about everything that happened. We also have to wait and see what Kenyon Martin has to say, because both of them were part of the show and were close enough to the situation to potentially have their own perspective on what was happening behind the scenes. And honestly, I don't even know what Skip Bayless is doing right now. To be completely honest with you, I don't really care what Skip is doing when it comes to this situation. And I know some of y'all didn't like when I said this before, but I'm going to say it again. Skip is not the person people are tuning in to watch by himself on a personal show. That's just the reality of the situation. Skip is a recognizable name. Nobody can take that away from him. He's been in sports media for a very long time, and obviously he has a massive history in the business. But when it comes to a show like Gil's Arena, the whole appeal was the chemistry between the different personalities. It was the group dynamic. It was the conversations, the arguments, the jokes, the debates, and the personalities all coming together. That's what made people watch. Because if we're being honest, nobody is sitting around saying, "Man, I can't wait to watch Skip Bayless sit down by himself and talk for hours." That's not really what people are looking for from him. Even when Skip was doing Undisputed, the appeal was that he had somebody sitting across from him. First it was Shannon Sharpe, then it was other personalities. The whole point was the back and forth. That's why I said Skip needs somebody across from him. He needs that chemistry. He needs somebody he can debate with and bounce off of. And that's not even necessarily an insult. That's just the format that has worked for him throughout his career. Now, I know Skip and Gilbert Arenas are cool. They play golf together and have a relationship outside of the show. So I understand why Skip was brought into the conversation and why he was considered for the show. I'm not saying there is no value in having Skip involved, but at the same time, we have to be honest about what the audience actually wants to watch. People came to Gil's Arena because of Gilbert, Rashad, Brandon, Kenyon, Nick Young, and the entire combination of personalities. That was the product. The chemistry was the product. The disagreements were the product. The fact that these guys could sit around and argue about basketball, talk trash to each other, and still have that natural chemistry is what made the show work. So when you start removing pieces from that formula, people are naturally going to notice. And that's really the bigger point I'm trying to make when I talk about these business decisions. When I see a show that's clearly performing well, when I see the audience showing up, when I see people wanting to watch the show 5 days a week, and then suddenly the schedule gets reduced to only 2 days a week, I have to ask questions. What happened? Now, I understand budgets. I understand that businesses have expenses. I understand that sponsorship deals, production costs, salaries, and everything else have to be considered. I'm not pretending to be an expert on the business side of these deals. If the numbers don't make sense, then I understand that changes have to happen. But when you have a show that's clearly growing, the audience is demanding more content, and the show is becoming one of the biggest sports shows on the internet, it becomes confusing when the company suddenly starts cutting back instead of expanding. And then you start hearing about other changes happening behind the scenes. The schedule gets cut, the structure starts changing, new people start being brought into the equation, the original group is suddenly being asked to do things differently. And at some point, you have to wonder whether the people making these decisions actually understand what made the show successful in the first place. Because sometimes corporations get involved and they start looking at everything strictly from a business perspective. They look at the numbers, they look at the budget, they look at the contracts, they look at the sponsorship money. And I understand all of that. That's how businesses operate. But sometimes, in the process of trying